Another VC Wisdom podcast with Dallas Price with us today. He is a venture builder at Forum Ventures. He's also co-founder at Leo Presste, a cool agency. Me and Dallas were discussing a couple of ideas. Dallas, can you introduce yourself and I'll get straight into it?
Yeah, for sure. Really appreciate you having me on, Charles. Super excited for this chat. But yeah, Forum Ventures, we're a venture firm. We're based out in New York and Toronto. We have an accelerator, a seed fund, and then we also have a venture studio, which is the side I work on. The venture studio, basically, we're coming up with new ideas, trying to validate those ideas, and then we'll install founders, basically try and help them grow, and we'll write the first check as well. So the idea is that we're trying to launch about a business a month. So it's a pretty hectic pace.
So for some context, you told me you were looking at jump at Forum and they couldn't find anything for you. You followed up with them that much, and pre-call we talked about outreach. I guess you're somewhat well versed in that. So much so that they literally decided to create a role for you, venture builder. Can you explain real quick what is your job here? Because prior to this call, you were mentioning that you are sending some outreach to pick people's brain. It seems it's very much about creating potential business ideas and then finding the right founder to execute on them. Is that so?
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, I mean, getting into VC is always a little bit of a difficult process. So yeah, my strategy was basically if I just email them enough times, eventually they'll give me a job. But yeah, basically, what the venture studio does is we look at about 20 ideas every single week. Basically, those ideas are coming from us looking at things like policy changes, introductions in new technology, stuff like applying business models from one industry to another industry, and basically just trying to figure out SaaS-based businesses that we think have a large enough market to gain additional VC funding. But we're always trying to look at businesses that can basically become $100 million type businesses. So we're looking at big industries, fintech, healthcare, AI, a bit of vertical SaaS, but looking at big industries that we know are going to be potential spots for these large businesses. So our process, yeah, we're looking at about 20 ideas a week. We cut that down to about 5 that we actually work on. So 75% of the businesses or the ideas that we come up with get killed before they even start. And then basically we're going through like this brain dump process where for the first week, we're not really talking to anybody. We're just doing a ton of desk research, doing a bunch of like internal validation, figuring out what's the easiest way we can figure out, what the market size is, who are the competitors, what could a potential solution looks like. But really, we're just trying to validate kind of more that there's a problem, there's a market big enough, and there's not, a couple like Series B or Series C type startups that have already solved the problem. From
Love
there,
it.
we go, yeah. And then from there, we're going into like the actual validation side of things. So from there is where we actually start talking to people, making sure that it's a real problem, gaining a lot more validation around that it's a large enough problem that people are trying to solve, trying to figure out, is this one of the top 3 issues that people are currently faced with? And then from there is when we actually like install a founder. So it's a clear problem. We have a pretty good idea of a solution. We'll go out and we'll do our founder search, bring on a founder. And then from there, it's all about figuring out what the MVP is, how we're going to build it, who our first 10 customers was, kind of that path to 100K ARR. And then once that's kind of all in line, we'll write the first check. So we do 250K USD checks, have a founder in, and at that point we're rolling.
Alrighty. Is this job common in VCs? Like, do they have multiple venture builders like you? Tell us a bit more about the job itself.
For sure. So venture builder is not a very common role. Venture studios are starting to become more popular. I was reading an article and apparently there's like 600 venture studios. That's probably a little high. I mean, there's probably like 50 to 100 legit venture studios in North America. And yeah, this role of venture builder, sometimes it's called like entrepreneur in residence, or there's a few different models that the role kind of looks at. But yeah, it's not super common. And basically, my whole job is to come up with ideas and vet those ideas, make sure they're basically good ideas. And then once we install a founder, work with that founder kind of as like your typical like first employee in a startup on the operation side, to basically, I mean, honestly, it's a lot of sales and a lot of marketing. But there's also that kind of like business conceptualization piece where you're making sure that what are you building? Does it make sense? You're thinking a lot about product, go to market, and ultimately, how are we going to drive revenue?
How do you get those business ideas? Like, what's your research process? Because you told me outreach, so you get these responses via emails. I'm not sure the incentive for founders to respond to you, so that's why I was suggesting the podcast, which we can talk about the pros and the cons. But what's your research process, generally speaking?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a real great offer we give people. Pretty much it's like, hey, we're VCs, we're thinking about investing in this space. This is our rough idea. What do you think about this idea? And I mean, typically we're reaching out to 100 people to get 3 or 4 meetings, and that's kind of the process. Honestly, it's something we haven't like extremely refined. There's probably still some work to do in like redefining that process. But yeah, some industries are harder than other. Honestly, I found that tech is like fairly easy. Like we were vetting a bunch of like generative AI type businesses. It actually wasn't too hard to get meetings. In fact, we got meetings with like pretty large startups, like the Department of Defense. Like people are interested in talking about these things and having their opinions heard. So if you phrase it right and the value is that, hey, we might build something that might be useful to you, it's been an okay offer so far.
Okay, and do you read stuff? Do you read reports? Like, what's the rest of your research process?
Yeah, so it ends up being a ton of reading. So for like idea generation, like there's like 10, 15 newsletters I subscribe to. I listen to a bunch of podcasts.
Which ones
Um,
are the best?
so like My First Million is like a sick podcast that
Yep.
like generally a ton of ideas come out of. And then for actual like newsletters, I always read like The Peak and Morning Brew. Every day, Crunchbase Daily is like another one that I'm reading. And then there's a couple of climate newsletters I'm subscribed to, a couple of healthcare ones I'm subscribed to, and then a couple of generative AI ones because those are kind of the spaces we're most interested in. It's that and Twitter and a lot of chats as well. We also do like roundtables and jam sessions with like industry execs to come up with ideas. But yeah, it's a lot of just like reading, thinking, like it's kind of a mindset thing as well, right? If you're constantly walking around trying to think, hey, what is a potential business that could come out of, my trip to the doctor? When you start having that mindset, ideas start flowing a little bit more.
Love it. Now to discuss the podcast idea. Um, there's two incentives why people accept your meetings. The first is ego, right? So being heard and
Totally.
just sharing what they know and getting rewarded to it. Another could be that when you speak to people and when you exchange words, you get smarter. I guess that's in the background. And the last one, which is also somewhat big, they might think that you will invest in them.
Totally.
So that's also a big one, which is why, yeah, you're still getting that response rate. But I do think the podcast idea could be really good if you could get it approved, because they have another incentive, which is to be publicly out there, um, to have like views, and if it's not going to be your VC that's going to invest in them, it's going to be other VCs. So I think that'd be very powerful, and you could create tons of content and attract more of these deals. What do you think are the pros and cons of that idea?
Yeah, I think that like coming up, like if there's very specific people we want to talk to and we're having trouble booking meetings with those types of people, I think that it's like anytime you can create like a really strong touch point with somebody. So whether that be, hosting somebody on a podcast or seeing them in person at an event or finding a way to kind of have that like one-on-one connection with somebody, I think you can always come up with like more unique ways than like your typical cold outreach, and those will always be more effective. So yeah, I think it's a great idea to kind of create kind of an interesting layer of content. And especially, I think it's cool that we can share kind of our process. Honestly, as a venture studio, we haven't done a ton of marketing yet. We've been pretty busy building, but I do like the idea of like showcasing more of our process, showcasing more of what we're working on, and how we're coming up with these ideas and these concepts.
Yeah, maybe we can talk, because the obstacles to that most of the time, what I'm seeing is mostly mindset. People think it's long, it's complicated, while the process is super lean, and Most of it is almost on autopilot. The main time use of running a pod is actually sitting down with people and recording. The
Yeah.
post podcast is like 3 minutes. Most of it is done by AI tools. For example, I've got this Opus.pro tool. What it does, I post the YouTube link and it creates all these YouTube shorts automatically with subtitles. Quite amazing. Um, your job is like literally coming up with ideas as a living, which is very fun and really rewarding. A bunch of people would want this job. Now there's the other side, to pair founders with the business ideas. How do you do that exactly? Tell us about your process.
Yeah, so we actually have like a talent team that focuses a lot on the recruitment process. So we have a head of talent and a head of recruitment, and their job is like entirely finding founders and creating like an exceptional founder experience. So for finding founders, like it's a mix of inbound and outbound. Sometimes we're reaching out to people that we think would be a good fit. So LinkedIn Recruiter is kind of the main tool we use there. We're looking for people who probably been past founders, are interested in the space, have maybe been at a VC backed company before. Those types of individuals. We're generally looking for people with product experience, or like really strong go to market experience. We find that like one or the other kind of complements like your go to market process and like who you would want kind of in like a second role as well. So yeah, it's inbound, we've gotten a decent flow. So like our team is, super involved on LinkedIn. Every time we have a new role, everybody has to post it, and we get a decent amount of inbound from that. And then also it's a pretty cool role, right? Where you're coming in as a founder to a company that already has a team, is already a validated concept, and you already have an investor saying, hey, I'm willing to put 250K into this business, which means your time from not having a salary to having a salary is actually like pretty low compared to the traditional founding process. If you look at like, hey, I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to then try and find a co-founder, start a deck, and get fundraising. Generally that process is going to take at least 6 months to a year. With a venture studio, we've had founders basically who have had a salary from one job to the next and haven't really lost out on your salary. So I think that's like another huge advantage. So yeah, we've actually found really solid founders. I'd say that I thought it was going to be a much harder process to find extremely talented individuals, and it hasn't been. I think it could be a little bit of market, a little bit just due to like the unique nature of the role. But yeah, the founders we've been working with have been just crazy.
So which is better, ex-founders having a 9 to 5 job, if 9 to 5 would be the right qualification there, because most is like an entrepreneurial job, or current founders not seeing PMF in their current startup?
I think it ultimately depends. I think we'd like to see at least some founder experience, and whether that was like founder got acquired and is now head of product at the acquired company, like that's a super cool path versus we had one founder who literally just sold his company and is wrapping up some paperwork and coming on. So I think we're open to either. It
It's
more
just, how do
depends
you
on the
reach out
founder.
to a current founder without being like offensive? Hey, is everything going well at your current startup? Or do you want a hand here?
Yeah, I think you gotta really walk a tightrope sometimes, but also, I mean, like, I don't know. I think you can occasionally offend somebody, and that's not the biggest deal.
My approach for
Um,
that is like, hey, do you know anyone, or like target industries that are not doing well right now? So let's say at the beginning of COVID, any like business heavily involving logistics or physical stuff, reach out to them, right? Another part of my experience has been that I'm always looking for co-founders to build my startup ecosystem, my agency ecosystem, to lead some of my startups. And the quality of ex-founders occupying a current job is kind of low, because they
mhm,
gave up on entrepreneurship. They're just not built for the game. Well, it's been my opinion. There's a reason why they have a current job, and it's that, yeah, they
mhm.
they failed or they gave up. And It's hard, man. It's hard to find. I guess it's a numbers game. You know, you reach out to 100, three will answer. Out of the three, maybe one will be a semi fit. Uh, get 10 interviews, you'll get like probably one perfect fit. And I also guess it's reaching out with the idea that you have, let's say fintech, new banking, well, outreach to someone that either their past startup was that, and or their past startup was in banking or fintech, and their current job is at a new bank. Type of companies. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of the hey, this is their job description. This is roughly what we're looking for. Do you know anybody? And all the time, I think you'll get that answer back that, oh, actually, I would be interested in that. And then on the other side of things, like it is kind of a numbers game, right? Like you're going to talk to a lot of people, especially like none of the people we're talking to are like having trouble finding a job. They're all people who have deep Rolodexes, have deep experience, and are really just looking for the right fit. So, I mean, our head of recruitment, like basically her entire role is sourcing founders and working with founders. So, it's not like, she's operating, it's somebody operating off the side of their desk doing it, oh, maybe I'll put in an hour this day trying to find this person. Like it's a deep process, and she's been doing recruitment for 10 years. So it's not something that we take lightly. It's something that we spend a lot of time and effort in to ensure we're working with the right people, because obviously if we have a not so great founder, the concept's dead in the water.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to her and ask her a bunch of questions. Um, Now for the business ideas, you had three. We have 5-ish minutes left. All three like caught my attention. Tell us about these business ideas, my first million style, and let's give a rating and the pros and cons to each real quick.
For sure. So talking about like big industry and economic shifts, I think there's a really cool thing happening with interest rates right now, with them increasing. And what that's going to do is create much more risk in the lending environment. So an industry that we were looking at that we were super interested in was this idea around creating like credit underwriting software for building material providers. So if you look at like your average tile store, they might be loaning out $100,000 to a contractor, $100,000 worth of tile to a contractor. But their process is actually less complex than what your process would be to apply for $1,000 credit card. And with construction companies having the highest rate of default in the US, I think there's a really cool opportunity to create kind of a workflow process, but also a better credit underwriting engine for these building material companies to decide who they're going to give loans to and who they're not going to give loans to. We started a little bit on this idea, but we're just having trouble making inroads. I think this is like something that if somebody had deep experience in building materials, we'd be super open to actually building with them. So if anybody hears this and is interested in the idea, like please reach out. I'm always happy to jam on stuff.
I'm gonna add my spice to that.
Totally.
One concept that would need to be implemented by this company is also to take the invoices. So you lend money, but you also have the system to take the cash from them, and it's obligatory. They absolutely need to take the cash from your system so that when you give them credit, and obviously there's a nice little interest rate in there, well, every time you get a payment, a percentage goes back to the bank to prevent the default rate. And that would be in the terms and condition. Square is doing that currently. They're loaning a bunch of money to entrepreneurs, and every time you get a payment in Square, it automatically reimburses the credit, and that's smart.
Yeah, I love that. Like the more you can get inundated into the actual workflow of collections, one, I mean, just collection software is massive, but yeah, if you're also doing the underwriting, also doing the workflow around credit checks and any of the documents needed for credit approvals, I think you can create an extremely sticky piece of software that becomes, kind of the centerpiece of the credit operations.
Now the Visa, I like that one as a nomad. Tell us.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been doing the whole digital nomad thing for a little bit now. And if you just look at some of these programs, like Costa Rica has like a tax-free visa. So if you don't own property and you can basically do the I'm an independent contractor thing, you can save upwards of, if you're making 100K, it's about 30 grand in taxes in Canada, depending on where you live. So I think there's just like a crazy opportunity. Like, and you don't technically need to live there every second of every day. But basically, I could get $1,000 a month apartment in Costa Rica, move there for the year and be up 18 grand and get to skip out on, the Canadian winter. So I think that's like just a crazy opportunity, but I think people are still reluctant to kind of navigate the process. So I think there's software involved, but also maybe like a hand holding process of here's how you get a visa, here's how you find the right place. Here's how you navigate, kind of the nuances of applying for the visa and moving to the country and all that stuff. And then I think there's just like so much opportunity and like go to market with, partnering with TikTok influencers or Instagram influencers that are like all over this place or all over this space. Yeah, and I think that's just like a really interesting go to market. I don't think this is like, a huge VC backable company, but a business is printing, a couple million a year. I think absolutely this is something that you could get off the ground really quickly.
So you mean you don't get double taxed while there, right? Is that what you mean? Because you'll still be taxed in Canada, right?
So I am not a tax attorney. So take any of this lightly, but if you don't own any property in Canada, and you don't have like a significant amount of assets, you could actually just move to Costa Rica for the year and you wouldn't pay any taxes as long as your funds aren't going through Canadian rails. So if you're being paid as an independent contractor through something like Deal, you wouldn't be getting taxed at all.
Holy shit.
So
I didn't know
yeah.
that. I think
So
Dubai has that too, right?
yeah, there's actually, I think there's like 16 different countries that have. So I know Costa Rica's one. Bali used to have one, but I think they took it away. I think Dubai has something. So yeah, again, not a tax attorney, so do not take this as tax advice. But yeah, there's basically like a crazy opportunity to save 30 grand a year in taxes
Yeah.
while
Yeah, I'm
living on
gonna
the
look
beach.
it up and yeah, gonna confirm that. And so does people in the audience do your background check. But if that's the case, that's pretty huge. Costa Rica, it's an amazing country. Cost of life is a bit higher there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very attractive. Now the influencer thing also caught my attention because what it's totally true that there's a bunch of creators and influencers that know cameras way better than Best Buy people. So what was your idea with that?
Yeah, so I went to Best Buy a couple weeks ago and was looking for cameras, and the person selling the camera knows nothing about cameras. So I think there's a really interesting opportunity to like partner with either micro influencers or even like larger influencers to host. It could be meetups, it could be photography sessions, it could be a bunch of these different things to basically get people driving traffic into retail stores, which is already an issue. But then basically you're partnering with a creator who actually knows more about these cameras and can provide more advice than the actual employees. So you probably just do a rev share on, if they're selling some cameras. But like if you could imagine, like you set up a studio in Best Buy, you have one of these TikTok influencers or a group of these TikTok influencers who are local to you blowing up about this event, probably going to get a decent audience. You're going to get people interested in photography there. And then you actually have these people acting as your sales agents as opposed to your staff. So, I mean, big box brands have historically not been good at all with influencer marketing and especially activating like micro influencers. So, I think this is an opportunity to actually take this influencer concept, which has worked extremely well in the digital world, and bring it into real life. And I think there's a ton of opportunities to do this with different brands and different concepts. This is just kind of one that I had with Best Buy.
100%, man. I'm fully in agreement with that. I think, yeah, you're gonna like some of my posts on LinkedIn because I throw one out of 20-ish of my posts is business ideas. My first million is probably the inspiration, although there's not much value in ideas that in most people, the better your ideas, if you execute on them, of course, well, the better it will pan out. That being said, one idea that I wrote a week ago was very similar was with car dealerships, right? Why doesn't Mercedes rent a 63 a G-Wagon 63 AMG to this influencer? Why not? If this influencer has 100 million influencer, they want the big car, they don't want necessarily to pay for it. Influencers aren't that rich, most of them, but they have a bunch of audience and they're not super business savvy. They don't know how to monetize. And that influencer would take this G-Wagon everywhere, that would film themselves in it, and that would have a huge economic impact on the business, way more than the cost of renting a G-Wagon for like for 3 to 4K a month. And why are they not doing that? It's just that they're not savvy with this, some
Mm-hmm.
even want to distance themselves from that. For example, from rappers using G-Wagon, but they need to understand that, like this actually helped them quite a lot to sell some more. So yeah, fully in agreement with that. Dallas, thank you for your time today. Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's probably the easiest, just Dallas Price. I also have a website, dallasprice.webflow.io, which I still need to update. So don't go to the website, just hit me on LinkedIn.
All right, man. Thank you so much. That was super cool.